about 10 seconds, you can start the meeting.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, August 26, 2020 Town of Isa Planning Board meeting. For this meeting, if you have a link that you signed up and you decided that you wanted to speak, even though you signed up only as a guest, please hit the Q&A function now at the bottom if you haven't done so already, and let us know that what item you want to speak on. Otherwise, obviously, you're on and can watch the proceedings. But if you want to speak, you need to let us know now so that we can flag that and have you ready to speak. We're going to go to our first item on the agenda this evening, which is a major subdivision decision item. Settlers Road Subdivision Hop Hog, formerly Krista Estates, MS 2007-005, northerly terminus of Settlers Road, 120 feet north of Old Post Road, Hop Hog. Applicant requests a 90-day extension of the final approval. The applicant is not on this evening, so I'm going to go right to Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you.
Thank you. This application was last heard on May 6, 2020, and was granted a modification of the final resolution to eliminate the requirement to install the cul-de-sac island that's typically put in these new roads per DPW's request. The prior final reapproval is set to expire on September 2nd, and with that deadline approaching, the applicant's representative, Mr. DiNicola, has supplied the town with a request for extension of approval. Said letter is attached for your review. Per Mr. DiNicola, because of the change in the members of Settlers LLC, there is a current mortgage on the property, and a release of that mortgage is required in order to dedicate certain areas. This release must be recorded at the county clerk's office so that the title company preparing the dedication title searches can certify to the town that there are no mortgages on record for those areas. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Suffolk County Clerk's Office has been closed to the public, and the proper recording has been delayed. Mr. DiNicola is awaiting their reopening in order to move this project forward. Based on this, staff recommends the board grant the allowable 90-day extension of the final approval.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Any questions from the board? Not seeing anyone raise their hand or say anything, I'll assume that's a no, and I will turn to a board member for a motion. Mr. Moriarty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move to grant the motion. Tanner, are they subject to any reservations or covenants at this point or no?
The same ones that are in the attached final resolution, so nothing as far as stipulations has changed. They'll be subject to the same ones that were previously approved.
Okay, if that's the case, I'll just move to grant.
Motion by Mr. Moriarty to grant the 90-day extension. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Brown. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? It's approved. One thing I didn't do is roll call. I will note that all board members are here with the exception of Mr. Ferrugiari. Item 2 on the agenda, major subdivision decision, Campo Brothers, Todd Court, MS 2018-001, east side of Lincoln Avenue, number 1805, 223 feet north of Flaxwood Drive, Holbrook, New York. Staff requests revision of the final resolution in order to eliminate the requirement to install and maintain a cul-de-sac island as per the Department of Public Works. The applicant is not here this evening. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was last heard on March 7th, 2019, where the board granted a 90-day extension in order to fulfill all requirements of the final resolution at that time. Those requirements were completed and the final plat was filed July 2nd, 2019. Building permits have been steadily issued and site construction has been underway. In concert with a few previous applications recently brought before this board, the Department of Public Works has requested that the cul-de-sac islands no longer be installed in roads that will eventually be dedicated to the town. The applicant installed the island before they were notified, however, is ready to remove the island. This is a formalization in the final resolution itself to reflect that change. Based upon DPW's road request, staff recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached amended final resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Any questions from the board? Not seeing any. Is there a motion? Mr. Bruno, I'm going with you this time, even though Moriarty had you beat. You got to unmute, though.
Gary, you got to unmute.
Got to unmute, Gary. I still can't hear you, Gary. There you go.
Now,
Hey,
I
you're
make a motion
live.
the application be granted.
It's a motion by Mr. Bruno to grant the application subject to the conditions. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second.
Nope. Mr. Brown, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it's granted. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Planning Board decision item Q Bay Shore PB 2020-011, northeast corner of Montauk Highway, State Route 27A and Fordham Place, Bay Shore 331 Montauk Highway. Applicant requests a Planning Board special permit for a restaurant in the Business 1 District pursuant to 68-272.1G. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the applicant, John Farrell, firm of Sonward Coscignano, 333 Earl Ovington Boulevard, Suite 601, Uniondale, New York. We have reviewed the resolution of approval with the proposed conditions, and we are amenable to those conditions. And that's all we have to say at this point, unless the board has any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Ms. Wozniak to give us a report, and then we'll come back for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The application was brought before the board in June, and the board reserved decision and left the public record open for 30 days so that anyone could submit written comments if they were unable to be heard because of technical difficulties. Since then, planning hasn't received any comments or questions from the public. At the Zoom hearing, some concerns regarding litter and traffic were brought up. Conditions were drafted to address those issues, which include requirements to install signage at the Fordham Place curb cuts to deter traffic from making a right onto Fordham, and requirements for the applicant to pick up litter on the subject property as well as properties within the vicinity of the restaurant. In addition, at the last hearing, the applicant agreed to update the facade to provide a more appropriate design. Based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you, Ms. Wozniak. Any questions for the applicant or Ms. Wozniak? Not seeing any. Mr. Farrell, when do you plan on opening so we can try the establishment out, or your client plan on opening?
He would open tomorrow if he could. He's desperate. It's been a long time with between the power outage and the technical difficulties after the first with the first hearing. He's had to wait about 60 days, so he's chomping at the bit.
All right, well, let me see if I can get a motion in a second. Is there a motion? Mr. Matamore, unmute. There you go.
I move that we close the hearing and grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions as enumerated by Ms. Wozniak. And good luck so your client can get going.
Thank you, Mr. Matamore. There's a motion by Mr. Matamore to grant the application subject to the conditions. I see Mr. Moriarty's given me a second. I'll take it. Is there a second? Is Mr. Moriarty second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, application granted. Good luck.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you, Joe. We're going to go to the public hearing portion of the meeting right now. Item 4 on the agenda, Town Board application, public hearing, Vassar Kaufman 222 LLC, CZ 2020-005, northeast corner of Brook Avenue and Sunrise Highway, State Route 27, number 1675B, Bay Shore, 1675 Sunrise Highway. Applicant requests a Town Board special permit for a fast food restaurant in the Business 3 District pursuant to 68-302G. Site plan modifications are required as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant. Mr. Robinson, you're ready to go when you're ready.
Certainly, yeah, good evening. I was waiting for Anthony Guardino to jump on. We're here before to convert the former Vitamin Shop that's located at 1675 Sunrise Highway to a Starbucks coffee shop with a drive-through. This building was formerly a Citibank with a drive-through. We're going to reactivate the drive-through side of the building, increase the landscape buffer to across from JCPenney's. We provide a 10-car stacking. We're going to do a slight reconfiguration of the parking lot to help divide the vehicular stacking for the Starbucks for the coffee from the general parking that's occupied by, formerly occupied by 24 Hour Fitness. Their store is actually now vacant. The rest of the shopping center is full. And we believe this is a really good adaptive reuse of an existing building. And we'd like to seek approval to open a Starbucks here.
Thank you. Anything further from the applicant?
I have Jeff Lazarchek with me if you have any questions on traffic or any of the traffic work that we've done at the site. Also, I believe Anthony Guardino, our zoning attorney, is on if I don't see him. If not, I'll answer any questions the board might have.
Okay, so we're going to go to Mr. Colgan to give us a report, and then we'll come back for any. Actually, I just want to point out there is nobody who's signed up to speak for this, according to my list in front of me. So we will go to Mr. Colgan for a report. Sean?
Just texting Anthony. All right. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As Mr. Robson stated, this application proposes converting a retail pad site into a coffee shop with drive-through. Prior to the existing retail use, the building was occupied by a bank with a drive-through. The existing zoning allows for the proposed use, and the property is located in an area where fast food is generally appropriate given its proximity to Sunrise Highway and a regional mall. The staff has reviewed the proposed elevations, and given the recent improvements to the mall and lack of landscaping on the subject site, superior materials are recommended to improve the overall aesthetics of the site. Additional architectural features could also improve the appearance, and the staff would like to explore this further with the applicant. In addition, while the applicant is demonstrating adequate queuing on the subject property, there are recent concerns over the COVID outbreak that drive-throughs are being more intensely used, and the staff would like to take a closer look just to verify what hopefully will be temporary impacts if this application should move forward while the pandemic is ongoing. So based on that, the staff would recommend that the board reserve decision tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. To the applicant, I guess there are concerns regarding drive-throughs and queuing due to COVID-19 and how things are going. So it's something that the staff would like to look at with you, as well as some of the architectural features of the building.
Absolutely. We'd be happy to meet with Sean and go over the architectural comments that he has given us. We do show 10-car stack. We certainly agree that during the COVID-19 component, before people were allowed to walk in and pick up their coffee, we definitely saw a lot of stacking issues at Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts and other places. I do note that Starbucks does have, for the regular customers that go there, there is an online app. You can order your coffee and then pay for it ahead of time and just go in and pick up the one now. It actually helps reduce the queuing at a lot of the Starbucks. We do show a 10-car queue. We can probably handle up to 13 or more without impacting any other tenant in the shopping center other than Starbucks themselves. I don't have the boards in front of me to point to how it's done, but there are 6 parking spaces right opposite the Starbucks front door, and it would just block the entrance on the southerly entrance to those spaces by having up to 13-car queue, but still have full access on the northerly side of that parking to come and go. So we believe that the queue can easily be expanded during the trying times without impacting any of the other tenants in the shopping center, and certainly without it impacting any people on the surrounding public roads.
Thank you. And I think Sean has just put up the site plan if you wanted to.
You can see where we end the queue, even with the curb line at the face of Starbucks, and you can see how between Starbucks and the main building, we could easily have 3 more cars queued up there without the impact to any tenant.
Okay. Thank you for that. I noticed Mr. Guardino has also joined the meeting. I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I apologize. I don't know why I had registered and I don't know why I didn't pop up there, but I don't know how far you got, Chris, but it sounds like we're kind of on the tail end. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay, I'll turn to any questions from the board. Mr. Moriarty.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick question. This is not just exclusively a drive-through Starbucks, is it?
Oh no, it's the drive-through is part of it. You
Right.
can really walk into the store, buy coffee, seating there. We also have outdoor seating on the south side of the building where we'll have a patio.
Yeah, that's the question I wanted to go to. What's the seating like inside as well as on the exterior?
The total seat count is 60 seats, including the indoor and the outdoor.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Not seeing any. Would the applicant like to add anything further?
That's all I have.
That's all I have.
Thank you. So I will entertain a motion. Is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty?
Yes, I'd like to move to reserve decision this evening and give staff time to work with the applicant to address some of the issues we discussed this evening.
It's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to reserve decision this evening. Is there a second? Mr. Matamore, thank you. There's a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, we're reserved. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Have a good evening.
As I mentioned earlier, on item 5 on the agenda, I'm recusing on, so I'm going to turn to my vice chairman, Mr. Brown, to take over that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 5, Bay Green Realty LLC, CZ 2020-002. East side of Bayview Avenue, approximately 210 feet south of Montauk Highway, East Islip, known as 7 and 9 Bayview Avenue. The applicant requests a change of zone from Resident A District to Resident C District in order to construct 16 semi-detached senior dwellings. Site plan modifications are requested as part of this application. Do we have a representative for an applicant?
Good evening, Mr. Vice Chairman. My name is Larry Gargano, Principal and Applicant for Bay Green Realty LLC.
Go ahead, Mr. Gargano, if you'd like to tell us about the project.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. So tonight's application is for the proposed redevelopment of 7 and 9 Bayview Avenue in East Islip. The site is approximately 2.48 acres and is located approximately 200 feet south of Montauk Highway. The surrounding zoning on the property is commercial directly to the north and commercial somewhat across to the west, and that would be the Mulberry Street restaurant and the American Legion Hall. And if you have to bear with me, I apologize, but this is my first presentation with Zoom, so I'm not quite sure how I can, I got to do screen share, so thank you. So I'm going to put up the radius map to indicate the property location, and where the hand is now, the hand icon, that is the American Legion. Directly across the street in this location is Mulberry Street Restaurant. And then there is single-family homes that continue directly across the west of our property and continue to the south and to the east. The property is currently zoned Residence A, which is second only to Residence B in terms of density for a single-family residential. And we have an as-of-right zoning that would permit 7 single-family homes. And if you bear with me, I just want to put that map up. And this is a yield map that was prepared by Barrett Bonacci Van Weel, civil engineers. This map indicates 7 individual lots as per the Resident A zoning, conforming to all requirements under Resident A without seeking of any variances. The total square footage that could be developed in aggregate of the 7 lots with accessory structures is approximately 32,361 square feet. We took a look at that yield and that square footage, and as we approached the zoning criteria and looked at this property for proposed senior housing, which is for tonight, which is the nature of tonight's application, we do several things prior to moving forward with a formal application. Obviously, the first thing we do is look at what the as-of-right development could be and the impacts of that development. And then we cross-check our proposed concept with the resident zoning that we are looking for. And in this case, would be Residence C zoning. I've indicated on this screen the legislative intent, which I'll just read the first sentence because I know the board is well aware, but for the benefit of those in the community that are listening tonight and may have comments. The provision of the legislative intent for residency zoning is enacted to provide the proper housing for the town's senior citizens. The board recognizes an existing and growing need for the provision of housing, especially designed for seniors based on economic conditions, demographic trends, and existing housing stock. Goes on to discuss other things which are not as important to take up time. What's most important for us when we look at potential locations is general site criteria to make sure that the site that we have selected and proposed development on meets those criteria easily. In this case, we certainly think it's a very good match. The site shall be located within convenient distance of a downtown center or an alternative existing retail services. As indicated in this map, the site is within walking distance of Main Street, and there's, as we talked about, a restaurant directly on the corner. There is a service stores, including a CVS pharmacy, a bank right here, which is directly around the corner from the property, and other strip center type services. So it meets A. For B, the site shall maintain convenient access to public transportation services, which it does on the Suffolk County bus route. C, the site shall be sufficient size and shape so as to provide required buffer, landscaping, and setback requirements. As you'll see later on in the presentation, the site plan that we're proposing tonight easily meets all of those requirements. The site shall be sufficient size to provide adequate parking. And as you will see again in the site plan, we are able to provide adequate parking without the request for any variances. And last, E, the site shall be sufficient in size to provide ample open space, recreation areas, and other amenities consistent with the town of Islip's goals. And again, when you see the site plan, you will note that those are achieved. So the legislative intent is a match. The yield of 7 single-family homes, as we compared the impacts of what we're proposing to the impacts of the single-family homes, we find that from our experience and from our traffic consultant who will speak later in this application, we find that the traffic impacts and general impacts are, if not equal, less impactful than the existence of 7 single-family homes that could be built on the property. In addition to that, it's come to our attention that recently the town of Islip has amended or is in the process of amending their code that would permit the legalization of basement apartments in single-family homes. While we didn't explore that as part of our yield study, that potentially could add additional density to a 7-family single lot subdivision. So we wanted to introduce that just as information because it's fairly new to us. The proposed zoning of Residence C, it would be for the construction of 16 detached and semi-attached 1.5-story cottage-style homes for senior citizen 55 and older. The Residence C zoning would permit up to 24 units on this site, but that is not the density we're seeking. We're seeking approximately 66% of the allowable density. Moving on to the process in which we began this application. After acquiring the property, as we have always done for many, many years, we reached out to the community and invited them to an informal meeting. I might backtrack for one moment and say that our initial thought for this property was to develop it as a senior rental community. And with that in mind, we developed a plan for 29 rental apartments in 2-story configuration, 4 buildings, somewhat larger in scale than well, much larger in scale than what's being proposed tonight, but still within the range of a large home. They were no more than 8 units per building, 4 on the first floor, 4 on the second floor. So they were, for all intent and purposes, very large homes, if you will, from an architectural perspective. We prepared a site plan, met all of the site plan requirements for residency zoning, including parking, setbacks, and buffer. Felt very comfortable that we were proposing something that was consistent with good architecture, good site planning, and meeting the zoning criteria. Prior to filing an application with the town of Islip, as I said before, we reached out to the community and introduced that plan to them. That meeting was held on January 22nd, 2020. We held the meeting at the American Legion Hall, and while we only invited by letter people within the 200-foot radius, because those were the addresses that we had, we allowed the meeting to be open to all residents that wanted to attend. The meeting was very well attended, and many concerns were voiced by the residents who attended that meeting. The predominant concerns, as we have all heard and this board has heard over and over again with change of zone applications, would be traffic impacts, effects of a rental community in a single family area, how that might affect property values, changing of character to the neighborhood, and also possibly setting a precedent for future change of zones in other locations. Our response to these concerns, while very valid concerns, our response was based on several different points. In terms of site selection, this site, in our view, is considered a transitional site, meaning that it is in between commercial and Main Street and single-family residential. So it's that one site in from the commercial district that typically has seen successful change of zone applications to a somewhat higher density multifamily component. They exist throughout the town of Islip and other towns. And again, they're generally a site in from the commercial district. They make that transitional palette, if you will, from commercial to single family residential. In my understanding of the town of Islip and the many projects that I've worked on and know about, it is not consistent that this type of zoning continues to migrate further away from the Main Street or the transitional location, which simply means that if this property were to be changed, it doesn't mean that another parcel 1,000 feet away or somewhere else further away from the Main Street would be entitled to the same precedent or the same change of zone. In terms of the rental aspect, which I'll only talk briefly about because that's not tonight's application, we again, from experience, know that rental communities, particularly the rental communities that are built today, are high-end, luxurious, quality communities that offer not only good housing for people that are renters by choice, but also provide a component of affordable housing. Again, from our experience and also from professionals that work in the industry, real estate individuals and appraisers and consultants, there's no comparison to a devaluation of properties should a multifamily community be built in and around a transitional location as this one is being proposed. And change of character and that concern that the community have also go somewhat hand in hand with precedent. Would something of this type start to cause a migration of multifamily housing throughout the community? We don't believe so. History indicates that it won't. In fact, many years ago, when I first began to develop in the town of Islip, the first multifamily project back in 1985 was Path 8 Gardens, which also was in East Islip. When my company developed that property, there hasn't been too many other multifamily projects built in the last 25 or 30 years along the town of Islip's East Islip corridor. There's maybe one or two. So the fact that one project will lead into a domino effect just isn't supported by history. So after that January 22nd meeting, We sat and we listened to the comments. We understood the community concerns, and we took a pause to decide how we wanted to proceed with the application. During that pause time, we spoke with a small group of community residents who wanted to meet with us, and we happily had that meeting. And at that point, we were on the fence about whether we wanted to pursue the rental application or come up with an alternative plan, but we wanted to hear what the people that had reached out to us said. And we did such that. We had a meeting. And at that meeting, after discussing many of the things, including the impacts that I just previously discussed, we started to, I presented a concept of doing for sale in a cottage style community with a lower density, and removing the rental component, removing the two-story larger building component, and very much proposing something that resembled the single-family homes that are in front and to the south of our property. I use as an example a community that I'm very proud of called Windcrest Cottages in Bohemia. We developed that property approximately 10 or 12 years ago. I'm just going to put it up on the screen if you don't mind. This property is 1.8 acres. It was on the corner of Church Street and not sure what that street is anymore. I forgot. I think Locust. It was. It has single-family homes to the north, to the west. It has to the directly across, and then it has a school and a church just to the east of it. It was 1.8 acres. We proposed 10 units, semi-attached and single-family, just like tonight's application. This is the end product, a very, very beautiful community, in my opinion. And to my knowledge, anybody that's ever seen the community has complimented on it. And again, it's a 55 and older. So we asked the community members that met with us to go look at this community. And we said that we would take a look at proposing something in this vein versus a rental apartment. We then proceeded to, excuse me, we then proceeded to research how best to execute our vision of creating a cottage-style community. And we're very fortunate in coming across an architectural firm known as Union Architects, located in Providence, Long Island, who work collaboratively with Ross Chapman from the West Coast. Ross Chapman is known as the guru of cottage-style pocket communities. Union Architects have a wonderful portfolio of communities that are very much in line with the type of concept that we had. And from there, we were off and running with an alternative concept. We discussed how to best address the community's concerns during the planning phases of this project, and then came up with a very nice site plan. On July 29th, mainly due to the pandemic, we were ready earlier. But
Mr. Gargano, if I just wanted to point out that the slide of the Bohemia community that you was talking about did not come up.
Oh, it did not?
No, if it's possible, could you please put that up so everybody could see that?
So you're not seeing the photo?
No, we'll still have the aerial view, your first slide.
You might have to stop sharing this one, Larry, and then you can share the other one.
Hit stop sharing?
Yeah, hit stop share and then share again.
All right, let me try it again. Now is it up?
Not yet.
Not yet, huh?
You did so well with the first one.
I know. For some reason, the PDFs go up easy. The photos, I don't know how to. I'm not sure what to do next. So.
Okay, well, continue with your presentation, and then we'll try to get those up to show everybody what the communities do look like.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well, I apologize for that. Okay, let me just see where I am here on my outline. So again, just to backtrack, we worked with Union Architects. They came up with a wonderful plan. And as part of the community feedback, and I don't think this photo is going to show up either, but do you see a photo now? Is there anything on the screen? No. Oh, boy. All right. I'm not sure how to resolve that. So there's two homes on the property, 7 Bayview and 9 Bayview. 7 Bayview is a small home, and 9 Bayview is a larger Dutch colonial with a history that became of interest to us. And some of the community neighbors had expressed their concern about the removal of that home. So we asked the architects if they could incorporate that home into the design, which they did, which you'll see shortly. And from there, we reached out to the East Islip Historical Society and asked them if they would be interested in us donating that home to them so that they could use that as their headquarters for archives and study and record keeping. I parallel this to the to the Bayshore Historical Society, who currently has a home on Maple Avenue in a very similar fashion. The home was donated to them via a couple of different donations. They use it. They're open a couple of hours, 2 days a week. There's never any traffic. There's never any heavy use to the property, but it's a wonderful amenity to the Bayshore community. So we looked at donating this home, and I apologize that you can't see it on the screen, but we asked them, and they happily said that they would be interested. So the plan that you're going to see tonight will show this home being preserved on the property. And I have a member of the East Islip Historical Society that will speak tonight to talk about their uses. I'm afraid to touch my screen because I don't know what's going to happen next.
Nothing yet.
Yeah, okay. I have a short video, but I suspect that may not come up either. But I'm going to try it if the board will indulge. It's about a 4.5-minute video. Let's see if
Hit the little share screen, the little green button there, Mr. Gargano. That may help you.
How's that? See anything?
That worked.
Okay.
That works.
There you go. All right. So that is Windcrest Cottages in Bohemia. And now I'm gone. Hold on. This that's the overall site of Windcrest Bohemia. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the 1.8 acre site, single family and semi-attached 1-story units. Again, very similar to what's being proposed tonight. Single family homes surrounding it, some commercial. This is actually a church, cemetery, and I think there's a school here as well. Get rid of this. And this is the, can you see that?
No, it hasn't changed.
Okay. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, so this is 9 Bayview. This is the Dutch Colonial that's on the property that we're proposing to save, refurbish, and donate to the East Islip Historical Society, and then build the cottages around it. Just get rid of this. I'm going to put a video up if it'll work. I don't know if it will. Oh. Can everybody see the video?
It's not up.
It's not up. Okay. I do apologize for this. I'm not sure how to do this. Any suggestions, Jeremy?
Yeah, do you want me to try to share it? I've got the link up
If
there.
you have it, please do, yeah.
Okay.
So if we can get this video up, this is a video prepared by Ross Chapman, who's an architect that specializes in the type of communities that we're proposing for Bayview Avenue. They work collaboratively with Union Architects, the architects that prepared the plans for tonight's meeting. And I think this video really says it all in terms of what we're proposing and how this will function and integrate within a single-family neighborhood and be part of the fabric of East Islip and not in any way be a negative to the community, but in fact be a very strong positive. Jeremy, if you can get that.
All right, so I'll give it a shot. Hopefully the sound works. Let me know if there's an issue here.
I don't hear any sound.
Yeah, there's no sound yet.
You guys can't hear it?
No.
Yeah, what I've never done is shared sound before. So that's a little beyond my capacity here. Larry, do you want me just to share it and kind of talk over it quickly? Because it does provide some nice imagery.
You can't get the sound?
I'm not exactly sure how to do it. Like I'm hearing it through my headphones, but I'm not exactly sure how I would have you guys hear the sound then too. Actually, let me try this. You guys still hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear the video?
Yes.
Now we hear it.
Okay.
Patterns, guiding patterns for pocket neighborhoods. And I just want to highlight a couple. And that is one, the scale of sociability. You've got a few houses coming together around a shared garden. There are layers of personal space. We walked in through one layer. That's the public street. This is the semi-public or the semi-private. And then between the sidewalk and the door are 5 more layers. The low hedge, the low fence, the private yard, the porch frame, the porch, which is a room, and then the layering continues with active spaces looking out to this space and private spaces farther back.
It's not coming out well.
So the layering of personal space allows for community to not be sort of affronted in your face. Julie, how's it like living here, and what would you want to share? Anything?
I love living here, and particularly because it's so beautiful. It's really oasis, and we have great neighbors. It's a nice small community. There are 16 houses here.
Jeremy, if you can hear me, I think we should take it off. It's not working well. Sorry about that. It was a good video. I'll send you all the link. You can watch it. So that really provides the overview. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That provides the overview of where we were, how we moved through the process of proposing rental apartments to modifying the plan significantly to address resident fears and concerns, and trying to come up with a plan that we felt very comfortable not only would be a tremendous asset to the community of East Islip and to the street of Bayview, but also provide a real special type of community that's not seen really anywhere on Long Island, and particularly not in Islip, with the exception of Windcrest Cottages in Bohemia. And while that shares the architectural style, the planning is just a little bit different than what we're proposing tonight, because it's still fed by a central road, driveways, whereas the plan you're going to see in a few moments really speaks to common space, shared gardens, and shared green space with remote parking. So with that, I'm going to ask our architect, Jeremy Lake, to do his presentation. Jeremy, please keep it as brief as possible, unlike myself. And then we'll ask Pat Lenahan from VHB to do a very brief discussion about traffic impacts. And we also have somebody from the East Islip Historical Society that will speak about the uses. So Jeremy, please.
All right, Jeremy, please give your name and your address for the record.
I can't hear you.
Jeremy, you have your mute on.
Jeremy, you're on mute.
Larry, maybe we could bring up one of the other speakers first and then come back to Jeremy. If that works with your presentation.
Pat, are you on?
I am. If you'd like me to jump in, that'd be fine.
Sure, please do.
Okay. Good evening, Vice Chairman Brown, members of the Planning Board. My name is Patrick Lenahan. I am the Director of the Transportation Division at VHB's Hauppauge office, 100 Motor Parkway in Hauppauge. For this application, VHB was tasked with evaluating the potential for traffic impacts related to the sought zone change at 7 to 9 Bayview that's being presented tonight. To do so, what we did, and Larry alluded to this previous, we compared the trips that would be generated by the as of right scenario versus the proposed plan that the organization would like to construct on the property. We used trip generation for 7 non-age restricted single-family homes and compared it to the 16 age restricted for purchase units, and summarized that in a letter that went into planning last week, dated August 21st. So to keep it brief and try to get back on track, the 2 trip generations we look at, we compared them during the normal peak periods that most folks are concerned about, the AM and PM commuter peaks in the morning and evening, afternoon, during the week, and then the Saturday peaks. And the bottom line is, and again, Larry alluded to it, the proposed zone change with the 16 age restricted units, given the nature of senior housing, winds up essentially equivalent to the peak period traffic generation we would see from 7 single family homes on the site. In fact, the numbers come out with the senior housing being slightly lower. So the punchline is, and my conclusion is, that were the application to go forward and the zoning change to be approved, that they're, given that the trip generation is so similar and perhaps even less, that the granting of the zone change will not have any negative impact on traffic conditions in the area compared to what could be developed under the current zoning. And that's essentially my presentation. If we want to do questions now or go back to the plan. Thank you.
We're going to take questions at the end of the presentation after our staff report and the public speaks.
Okay.
Jeremy, are you able to get on?
Yeah, Mr. Gargano, do you have another speaker?
Laura, you on? I do not. I think she was having technical problems as well from the East Islip Historical Society. But I can tell you what was discussed with the use of 9 Bayview, that there would be, if this property were to, if this change of zone were to be granted, the home would have restrictions on it as to the use. It could not be used for public gatherings or any intense use. It would be strictly for internal meetings of the Historical Society, archiving their records and somewhat of a museum for their work.
Larry, I think I hear Jeremy. I think his mic is live.
Not to me, it's not.
Okay. I'm sorry, Larry. Go ahead.
Sean, are you on? Sean still with us? Sean Colligan?
Yes, I am.
Sean, is it possible that you have the link? Is there any way of you putting that site plan up if Jeremy can't?
I can put the presentation. Just let me know when to stop.
I could walk us through.
Hello? Hello?
Jeremy, we hear you now.
We hear you, Jeremy.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Hallelujah. I have no idea what happened. I'm so sorry
you're
about that. Trying to get that video to like screwed up my whole system.
Get the video. Go to the site.
All right, perfect. I'm glad it's working now. All right, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. I will try to be brief since we've taken a little bit of time here. So this is the Nula Green project. I think Larry gave you plenty of oversight relative to the site and its context. This is an existing aerial of the site. You can see the 2 homes within the red boundary area. This is a survey overlay on top of them. So as Larry mentioned, the top left corner, 7 Bayview, we are proposing to remove, but 9 Bayview, which is the home here in the center of the site, that Dutch colonial home, we are proposing to save and repurpose as he's been describing. So what I'm going to show you here, we just did a series of diagrams to kind of walk you through sort of how we approach the site analysis that helps sort of explain each of the little aspects as we go through, and it concludes with the site plan itself. Again, existing house to be saved. There are also a number of existing trees on site. We certainly knew that we wanted to try to preserve this very large tree that's here in the center of the site just behind the existing house and really use that as the focal point of the cottage court. There are a couple of other existing trees just off of that are in great health and condition that we want to work with. We certainly know there's a couple trees in the lower left-hand corner that we want to preserve because they're sort of provide an important screening to the existing home that's quite close to the property line there. And there's obviously a great number of other trees on the site, particularly around the border of the site. The survey we were working from didn't have those trees tagged yet, but I'd like to think that we'll be able to preserve a number of the ones along the edge, again, for additional screening. Because we wanted to preserve the existing home, the other thing we wanted to do was to make sure we preserved an open space in front of that home, so it still had an active role and part on Bayview Avenue. And so we want to preserve almost a front lawn, if you will, in front of the existing home. But because the goal is to do a cottage court along the lines of what you may have seen in the video, we thought we would also have a secondary space a little further into the site that has that large tree as the basis at the center of it. And then certainly we would connect those 2 spaces. So they are 2 distinct but connected spaces. In terms of the homes themselves, then the intention would be to have a couple of homes actually along Bayview, much like there is across the street, the existing context of Bayview. But most of the cottage court itself would actually wrap around that green space towards the back of the site. In terms of vehicular access to the site, again, with that sort of central green and the homes wrapping around that, we have 2 points of access. One, a drive along the northern portion of the site and a shorter drive along the southern portion of the site. And off of those is where we would have our parking. So parking is consolidated in this case, not unlike you would have in a multifamily condition where you'd have a parking lot and then you walk to get into the building. And so in this case, a lot of the parking is sort of to the northern portion of the site, a limited amount of the parking is to the southern portion. And then we did have the opportunity, because we had a little bit of extra dimension up here, we often call these car barns, but it's really a series of attached single garages that would be used by some number of the units that are here. And so those are located here where they kind of screen the parking area from the couple of cottages that'll be right there. And then lastly, just thinking about and showing how the buffers have worked out. As Larry mentioned, along the sides and the rear, we've been able to maintain the 25-foot setback that is required. But in the front, we are showing a 40-foot setback to the homes. Porches would encroach within that. The porches would be about 8 feet deep. And our logic there is that that existing house at the corner 7 Bayview is about 32 feet off of the front of the street. And certainly when you look at Bayview up and down, you get a whole range of setbacks. But you can certainly see even right across the street a number of units that are actually even closer than what we're proposing. But what's nice is with the existing home setting back, again, we have a varied setback condition, much like you'd find going up and down Bayview. So again, being sort of very contextual and trying to plug into the way the street currently feels. So this is the resulting scheme, taking those various things into consideration. So Bayview Avenue, parking's allowed there, so guests would certainly be allowed to park on the street. This is that front green in front of the existing building. And we're showing the potential for a little small community amenity here. That wouldn't be a conditioned building or anything. That might be, the shared mailboxes or maybe just a little gazebo, something that gives it a little bit of character and presence out on the street. And you can see there's a pair of duplexes, one here units 2 and 3 and one here 15 and 16, that then basically sit on either side of the existing home. So those, even as duplexes, would have a scale and character that's not too dissimilar from some of the larger homes that are in the existing community. But to Bayview itself, you can see we have a small cottage up here at the top and then the side of those 2 duplexes. And with the existing home, from Bayview, the project would effectively have a front that would feel like 4 units, 4 single family units like you might expect to be here, with the rest of the units really being back further into the site where they wouldn't be quite as apparent. So overall, as Larry mentioned, 16 units, half of those are single family attached as duplexes, half of those are single family detached as standalone cottages. All of them would be cottage scale, 1.5 stories. We're looking at square footages in the range of 1,400 to 1,500 square feet. So these are definitely cottage scaled sort of units. You can see this parking area up to the north with this 1 car barn, consolidated garage building, some additional parking down to the south. And then we have a series of these walkways that bring you through, connect you. Here's that large cottage court in the back. But that's really how the residents would come and park and walk through the sidewalks, come into the front porch, say hi to their neighbors as they go by. Obviously, the real intention and principle behind this thing is creating a very communal sort of way of life, folks being out on their front porch and talking to their neighbors and knowing their neighbors. And so that really is the sort of center of activity. So everything does connect and feed through those spaces. So again, 16 total units, 35 total parking spaces is what we are proposing. We had come up with this as an alternative plan in the off chance that we couldn't preserve the existing home. The idea was that we wouldn't then try to layer in additional density. We would just provide some sort of community amenity at that location, at that sort of pivotal point, but maybe pull it back a little bit, open that up a little bit. But again, our intention is to keep that house. This was really just a in our pocket plan B if it came to it. This is a project that we've completed, Concord Riverwalk, which is up in Concord, Massachusetts. As Larry mentioned, we've collaborated with Ross Chapin over the years. This was a project we worked on with him. This is a project that is also 16 units. You can see a series of smaller cottages arranged around a central green cottage court. You can see the beauty of being able to preserve an existing tree here. It makes it feel like it's been here for 50 years and not just 10. This project also featured some small community structures like this little screened in pavilion in this case, or a fire pit. So again, this is the sort of scale and character and feel of what we're proposing here. And likewise, we haven't yet designed the units specifically for this site, but we would expect them to be very much in keeping with the character of these, where essentially you have your open living spaces at the front of the cottage where they transition off of a front porch. And then you'd have a master bedroom on the first floor, which again, for adaptive adult sort of community is what the folks would be looking for. So it's really single level living primarily, but we do have a limited upstairs area in the half story up above, the option for a second bedroom or a home office, and some attic space for some much needed storage, typically when folks try to downsize into units of this sort of scale. So that gives you a sense of sort of the character and what the architecture could be like. And then without going through each of these specifically, again, we tabulated and tallied all the various sort of zoning requirements and feel like we're very much in the spirit of what's being required. I will say one area we need to kind of work through is the zoning is written thinking of the project as a single family attached or a single family detached, and we're a combination of the two. So on things like density and FAR, we fall somewhere in the middle of the range, as you would expect as a result. But again, we think we've got a project here that very much is in the spirit of what the zoning is expecting. So that's everything I've got. And I can either take questions, or I think you said you wanted to do them at the end, so I can bring this back up when the time comes if it's appropriate.
Yes, we're going to, when Mr. Gargano's presentation's finished, we're going to take public comment, and then we'll come back with any questions to you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I've completed what I wanted to provide as an overview and general topics. I want to thank Jeremy for his presentation. And if there's no questions at this time, I'm prepared to listen to community comments and be available for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Just, please stand by, and I'm sure we're going to have some questions that are raised by the public and from the board that we can present to you, and then we have the staff report. So at this point, we're going to open up to the public. We have several speakers. We ask that you do keep your comments to 3 minutes if possible. And we will answer all the questions at the end of your testimony. So with that, we're going to call up the first speakers.
First speaker is Pamela Fremgen.
Pamela?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Pamela, just please give your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Pamela Fremgen, and I live on Wildwood Court in East Islip. I purchased my home 22 years ago in a single family neighborhood. I do have some points that have not been raised with the presentation that when I attended a closed door meeting with Mr. Gargano that he had brought up. So do I speak about that now or later on?
No, you could ask any questions you want now. And at the end of the presentation, when we hear all the speakers, we'll get all the answers.
Okay. So I want to know more about that traffic study. It didn't sound like it was an actual study. And since I'm on that road every day in Bayview, I did not see anything out for a traffic study. I saw something on Carlton, but not Bayview. I'd like to verify all of the parking spots, how many there are. I know there was a mention about parking on Main Street, or rather on Bayview, which is a huge concern. And just to be clear, the 55 and older, from what Mr. Gargano had expressed, that the residents would be allowed to have any children 19 age and older, in which the last census said that there are 1/3 of American families that have children 19 and older living in their homes. So those are a few of the points that I wanted to raise. Then I'll get to my update here. So again, I said I was at that closed door meeting. One of the things I asked Mr. Gargano is why you would build in a residential neighborhood rather than on Carlton Avenue behind CVS, or there's actually a nursery there. That's sort of an eyesore. Same walkability and everything else that Mr. Gargano explains. And basically what he responded was, would you want your mother to live on Carlton Avenue? So a builder whose sole purpose is to make money doesn't think building on commercial property is good enough because he can make more money south of Montauk, devaluing all of our property. The updated proposal for 17 houses on 2 existing plots where 2 single-family houses sit, Mr. Gargano could stand to make a net profit of $5 million. So why would he stop at 2 plots? He had a list of all the homeowners, everywhere they live, the size of their properties. I do not believe that this would be it for these 2 properties. Also, as far as the building style and much of what was discussed in the presentation, which I also heard in this closed door meeting, is really exactly what's in Westbrook already. So if anyone wants to see what this will look like, they just need to walk Westbrook, because there's about 370 of these villa type homes there. And by no means is 1,500 square feet a cottage. It is a house. My son just bought a house that's 1,500 square feet. Bayview Avenue is currently a thoroughfare feeding the neighborhood traffic, including but not limited to the American Legion Hall, where during non-COVID times, they hold meetings and rent the hall for parties, and it is a bottleneck for traffic.
Mr. Vice Chairman, that's 3 minutes.
Pamela, we have several speakers, so we ask that if you please wrap up.
No. So Bayview is home to American Legion Hall. It's an entrance and exit for all of the businesses, residential homes, wildlife preserve. There's a group home, town marina, private marina, East Islip Beach, sports field, and Bayside restaurant. There are existing safety concerns with Bayview as it is, with an increase in traffic feeding all of these people coming and going, and people walking, running, riding bikes, and competing on the road. East Islip itself is home to Momentum Nursing Home, 4 apartment buildings on Montauk Highway, 2 on Carlton, Bell Laurel, Fairfield Apartments, existing homes with illegal apartments, and Westbrook Village that was just built by Mr. Gargano, where there are 370 of these villa units, which have not yet occupied, and 260 units apartments. I asked the town council, I contacted Mr. Balone, I contacted Angie Carpenter. When these original meetings started, there was concern over improprieties that have yet to be addressed regarding the town council and Mr. Gargano. I expect these to be addressed before we go any further with this. In regard to the building, Mr. Gargano, not only in East Islip, but also within Islip Town. It is simply not sufficient for one of the board members to recuse themselves when they have direct influence over the board. Greenview Properties has.
I'm going to ask you to please wrap up. We have a lot of speakers tonight.
A zoning
And
variance.
this meeting, Pamela, if you listen to me for a second, it's not going to be over tonight. You're going to be able, an application of this size, very rarely will there be a decision made, which I would be shocked. I've been on the board for 14 years that a decision would be made tonight. So in all actuality, the meeting would be left open, which means that you may submit anything else tomorrow, the next day, based on the information that you hear tonight. If there's something that's missing, you could still submit and you could still ask questions.
It's
And
impossible
it's
to
the
go
same.
through all of this
Pamela,
information.
just listen to me. If it'll be the same as if you said it here tonight also. So we have a lot of speakers, so I do have to move on at this point. Sean, could you call the next speaker, please?
Mr. Vice Chairman, the next speaker is Mary Moore.
Mary?
So I have a millennial with me. I think some of you should have gotten a millennial during a Zoom meeting. They're very helpful. Anyway, so my name is Mary Moore. I live right next to the property. I'm that house that's right on the border at 15 Bayview Avenue. I've been living here for 25 years. And as has been discussed, traffic issues on Bayview are very problematic. There's congestion. There's a dangerous and difficult time making a left onto Main Street. When cars are parked, Jeremy, you mentioned that maybe people could park on Bayview. When they're parked on there, they're sticking out into the road. It's a very congested road, so they're taking up part of the road. When trucks are there, they take up a whole lane and now becomes a single lane road, and it's very difficult to pass. The whole situation is dangerous, especially now that we have people walking and riding bikes, and I'm sure the seniors would want to do that. So I find that to be a very big problem. But with problems and being a boss, I don't like people complaining without coming up with some sort of solution. So what I would like to propose, just even for now, this is happening now and we don't even have this proposal yet. So just even now, certainly if we're going to go that way, I'd like to propose
a no left turn. I want the board to consider a no left turn off of Bayview onto Main Street, because it just bogs people down halfway down the block if someone's trying to make a left turn. So that's one thing. In addition, and I'm sorry about this, Jeremy, I would like to have a no street parking on Bayview from Main Street to probably Duval or Timber Point, because what happens is as these cars are coming down, there's really no place to park. So they're sticking out into the streets, and it really causes, again, jam ups, and it's kind of dangerous. I'm always going and tapping on people's house and say, you know, that beautiful truck or Mercedes you have is sticking halfway out into the road, and I would move it. In the, you know, and it was already mentioned by Pamela, that the town has approved a lot of activities, but it isn't the Bayview that it was when I moved here. It has all sorts of activities at the marina. It has Mulberry, which entrance and exit is right on Bayview. So there is a huge traffic problem at this time. And I think right now is the time to change it, because the property is going to be developed somehow, some way, and we already have major problems with the traffic. So I just wanted to say that this traffic issue, it really affects our area in East Islip. It affects the town, but especially it affects the Bayview Avenue residents. When I moved here, it was kind of quiet and it was lovely. And now we have all this activity and even more activity coming. And I think it's a reasonable request. And I'm really hoping that the town allows for the no left turn and for a zone of no parking on Bayview Avenue, because it causes a lot of problems. Thank you for listening to me. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Mary.
Okay.
Sean, may we have the next speaker?
Yes, the next speaker is Roseanne Adams.
Roseanne?
Where is she?
Roseanne, can you hear us?
Let me see if I can-
Roseanne, you have your mute on.
Unmute?
You're good now.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. I just would like to comment. I live at 43 Bayview. I've been here for 35 years, and we moved, as everybody says, because it was a beautiful area, many open spaces. And I am really opposed to the changing of the zone. I think that would be a dangerous precedent, even though we've been told it wouldn't be. I think there's too much overdevelopment, and we'd like to keep our single residences. And I'm just curious as to why the zone can't remain with 7 homes. Why must it be, in my opinion, overdeveloped into 16? So that's really what I have. And I'm also a little worried about the traffic as the other people, because we were just told that it was done at the peak hours, AM, PM rush hours, but not on the weekends when people are running down there with their boats and the ball games and, you know, all kinds of stuff going on. So that's what I would like to know. Why can't it remain as is, the zoning, and just have the 7 homes? And appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Sean, can we have the next speaker?
The next speaker is Susan Thomas.
Susan? You have to take your mute off. Susan, could you hear us? All right, Susan, we can't hear you, so we're going to move on to the next speaker. We will come back to you. Sean, can we have another speaker?
Mr. Vice Chairman, that's all the members of the public that signed up to speak tonight. The rest are
Okay,
all
so let's
attendees.
try. Susan, can you hear us? Your mute is off now, but we can't hear you.
Mr. Vice Chairman, someone has raised their hand to speak. You'd like me to call on them?
Yes, please do.
Okay. The next speaker is Tricia Lisa Farina.
Hi, I live in Islip. My concern is about the traffic, and I think the zoning initially was in place for a reason, to limit the traffic on a residential road for kids playing, recreational purposes. And the deer are also already a problem on Bayview Avenue. You know, you keep developing and developing, and the deer keep going further onto Main Street. And then when the deer jumps in the road, who do you blame? The overdevelopment or for the deer running out of hectare? It's totally unfair. Not to mention, the traffic study was done during a pandemic when the traffic isn't a true picture of what the traffic is on a Saturday morning with the boat traffic and the ball games going down Bayview Avenue. That's all I'd like to say.
Okay, Tricia, thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Okay, Sean, there's no other speakers?
We do have two more. Excuse me, three more. The next speaker is Jessica Deering.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So I thought that you were going to be able to see me. It would make a lot more sense. But my name's Jessica. I live on Indian Orchard Lane in East Islip, right off Bayview. I'm a young homeowner. So I moved here recently, just a couple years ago, and I moved from Nassau. And I'm sure everyone knows the traffic in Nassau, the properties in Nassau, and that's the reason we moved out here to Suffolk, to East Islip. So a lot of my concerns have been brought up already, but I'd just like to reiterate them. Actually, one thing that Mary had pointed out, the parking along Bayview, when that was brought up, that's a very large concern because when, like Mary said, when cars are there, when trucks are there, when there's landscaping there, you cannot have two cars passing. It's no longer a two-lane road. So that's very concerning. Also, the traffic study, whenever that was conducted, that's a concern. And I'd also like to know, I know that this is about the 16 buildings, but it's possible that they could build up to 24 cottages. So I'd like to know what that plan would be in case in the future they change their mind for whatever reason. And I'd also like to bring up the point that I understand this is a 55 and up community. You know, we do have quite a few of those around in the area, but also regarding the traffic having the same impact as the 7 homes. You know, people who are 55 and up, they're not retired. They're still working. They have children. They have more than one car. You know, many people, especially people who are going to be able to afford these quote unquote cottages, may have more than 2 cars. So I just want to bring up that point. And like someone else said, you know, the zoning was made for a reason in this residential area. And there is also a plan that can be executed without changing the zone. And that's all.
Okay, Tricia, thank you very much for your comment. We do have a few more speakers. Sean, can we have another speaker?
The next speaker is Howard Williams.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Howard.
Yeah, I'm Howard Williams. I live on 111 Bayview Avenue. I've lived here for about 30 years. And my main concerns, some of which have already been addressed, are the traffic problems on Bayview, particularly at the junction with Montauk Highway. And also the fact that by amending the zoning in this way, you're encroaching on what people would like our single family residential neighborhoods. And whether you can say that, well, we won't do it again, this is as far as we'll go. The fact is that once you start doing it, it makes it easier to continue doing it. And that while growth is important, it certainly is to most communities, I think it should reflect the desires of the community and the people that are living here and benefit them as well as developers. So specifically, my concerns that are with respect to this project are that you can't have any parking in Bayview Avenue, number one, because there's not enough room. Anyone who lives on this street knows that. And number two, I agree, if this project goes ahead, and I personally hope it does not, you will have to prevent left turning at the end of Bayview Avenue. There's virtually no way anyone will be able to go anywhere. We can barely go anywhere now. As also has been mentioned, the traffic study, quote unquote, I'm sure did not reflect the fact that there's very heavy marina traffic to the playing fields at the end of the street, particularly on the weekends. There's boats and other large vehicles. And that also has to be considered in any kind of quote study that's done to address what this community is going to do. Personally, as a resident of this area and this street for a long time, I would prefer that the zoning be left the way it was. If they want to build 7 single-family homes, that's fine. The project looks very nice, but I'm not sure that it benefits our community at all. So I thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you for your comments. Sean, do we have another speaker?
Next speaker is Kelly Carson.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Kelly, go ahead.
Hi, Kelly Carson. I live at 8 Bayview Avenue. Again, my concerns are pretty repetitive, but I think the thing that I'd like to focus on at this point, Larry and I have discussed some of the things that I would like him to change, and he has made some changes, to the plans from those suggestions, but. From living on this avenue, Bayview Avenue, we can't get out of our driveway half the time. I mean, we cannot actually get out of our driveway being so close to the main street connected to Bayview Avenue exit. And we also have cars constantly aligning the street. So I can't see to back up out of my driveway. So once again, we can't have more of that problem. We need to definitely restrict parking on the street so that there's not accidents. I also have a young son. It terrifies me to think about what it's going to be like for him to, try to play with all of that going on. And I'd also think that if we're actually talking about 55 and plus as seniors, which, okay, sure. We definitely need to put some crosswalks in. So if we're going to approve this, I think some other things need to be approved. I think you need that light. You need to make it so that these people who need this access to these walking amenities can actually walk there without getting slammed by cars, because I can't make it across that street without running, personally. So if I can't do it, I'm not quite sure how that is an amenity. So I guess that wraps up my concerns. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kelly. Sean, do we have any other speakers?
That's all who raised their hand. We just have Susan Thomas left if she's available to speak.
Susan, are you available now? Susan Thomas? Susan, I see that your mute button is on. I see your mute button's off. Can you speak? I don't think that we're going to be able to hear from her tonight. Having no other speakers tonight, then we're going to move to the staff or to the board to see if we have any questions from the board.
No.
Oh, wait a second. Susan, is that you?
Should I put Dan on?
Susan?
I'm sorry, Mr. Vice Chairman. Dan Dayhill has raised his hand.
Okay, and then after that, we'll move to the staff questions. Dan?
Yes.
Okay, and then
after that, we'll move to the staff. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, hi. Okay. Can you hear me? I live right next to the property. Yes. 11 Tupelo Lane.
Dan, I'm getting feedback. It's,
Yeah, I think he's got his phone on. I think.
you have
Dan
your
has his
phone on also?
No, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. No feedback? Good. Okay. Listen, I live next to the property, and I like the design of the property. And I think the one problem that you're hearing it over is the traffic. My concern is twofold. For the people who are going to live in this village, at times it's so backed up, these people aren't going to be able to get out of their driveway. Okay, out of the exit. It's so congested over there, particularly on the weekends. But when the softball and the lacrosse tournaments are going on, it's virtually impossible to get up and down that street. Over 55, emergency, someone's sick, someone's got a heart attack, and you're not going to be able to get to them because no one can enter that village complex. So I think it's a concern for the town board that something has to be done. Whether it's a light, I think is the best solution. I don't think a no left turn really completely solves the solution or the problem. I think a light needs to be there so that traffic can get across and get out of the way. But that's my only concern. I live right next to it. I think it's a very nice plan. But I do think that the concern for the traffic there is a real problem. And it's legit, and it's a safety hazard as well. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay. At this point, we're going to move to the board and see if any of the board members have questions. Mr. Bruno?
Yes. Hello, Mr. Gargano. Good evening. I have a couple of questions for you, a couple of things. There's no, again, I guess everybody's talking about it. There's no light at Bayview in Maine, right? We have nothing there. Is that correct?
You're muted, Larry.
On, Larry.
Mr. Gargano, you have your mute on.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. There is no light at the intersection of Bayview and Main Street at this time, correct?
Mr. Lenahan can study that for us and give us some idea of what the story is with that. I think we've all had some familiarity with it, and it's, anecdotally, it seems to be a problem, but, there may be answers from a traffic consultant to say it isn't. I'd be interested in hearing that. For Mr. Lake, just looking at it, and I overall like the look of the plan, but 2 things that concern me. I assume we'll eventually develop the architecture a little further. I have concerns about looking at the sides of buildings 2 and 16, just inherently because we're looking at the side of the building. I'm sure that you guys can do something to deal with that. Mr. Lake, a question for you, somewhat minor, but it could become an issue. I noticed in that video that you were trying to show, which has some value, to me at least, Larry, I thought there were some things in it. The walks in there are shown as gravel. Are you guys looking to do that?
No.
Okay, the reason I ask is, and this is one of those little technical things that comes around to bite you later. From what I'm seeing on page 18, where you've got that whole breakdown, Mr. Lake, you seem to be counting all the walkways as part of the landscaping. And I don't think they will qualify as that. And you may find that all those little walks just add up to a lot of things that hurt you. So if you could give that another look, that's why I asked about whether or not it was going to be something that would count as a landscaping. And the other thing that I have, which, and this one I find a little more troubling. I mean, I see where you have the garages, but one of the problems I'm having with that is that, one, there's no assurance somebody's going to use that as a garage to put their car in. They may very well use it for something else, whoever and however you distribute those, which means that those 6 are really not even parking spaces at that point. And you've only got it. So at large, we're going to lose some spaces. And I also have to admit that I have to agree with the speaker that said that at 55, you really can't assume that people are down to one car. So I guess my overall concern here is I'm really wondering if the parking is sufficient. I think that the garages, while a great amenity, and while I like what you've done for the fact that it blocks that parking from, I mean, I understand using it as the block that it is. I'm just concerned that that counting it in the parking, and I know that that's technically correct, I'm not disagreeing, though we would have to then decide that the spaces in front of them is the same space for the person using the garage, and we can't be guaranteed they're using the garage. So that's pretty much where I am with everything.
If I could just comment briefly on that. We are not using the parking structure as a count for the parking calculation. There are surface parking that meet, or I think even might exceed the parking requirement under the change, under the zoning. So as you just
it doesn't on page 18, Mr. Gargano. That's what I'm reading off.
Yeah, so I included it in the count, but there were 6 spaces. We have 35 spaces, including those garages. 32
there are only 29 surface spaces and 32 required, Mr. Gargano. That's why I brought it up.
Well, I think it's 1.75 under the zoning.
I'm not sure. Are these considered they're single family houses, aren't they?
No, for residence C, it's 1.75.
Okay.
So we used the 1.75 as the calculation for surface parking, did not use garages for that count. But as you pointed out, it would be correct that if somebody were to have access to the garage, they would also have that parking space directly in front of the garage as their assigned parking space.
Yeah, I think this is a nice tight plan. It's obvious that you've minimized the amount of paving, and I think we're all always in favor of that, but I'm just not sure. We can't have the parking on Bayview. I think we all agree with that. And so I have some concerns of the number of parking spaces that may be necessary. It's always an economy of scale. If this was a huge project, you start to say, yeah, somebody's not in this one, somebody's in the other one, it doesn't get used. But when you've got a smaller project, I have a little concern about it, that's all.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. Do we have any other questions from the board members? Mr. Moriarty?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Mr. Lake, could you speak a little bit about the number of bedrooms in each cottage? And I specifically linking it back to one of the comments that one of the speakers raised about the possibility of children coming along as well. I didn't get a good sense of, are we talking mostly 1-bedrooms here, or is there a blend that's anticipated?
The intention was that all the cottages would be 2-bedroom cottages. So there would be a bedroom on the ground floor that presumably the folks that live there would use on a day-to-day basis, but there would be a 2nd bedroom upstairs that would be available either for a guest or I suppose an adult child, or for a home office for any other number of reasons they might want to have that space. So there's 1 bedroom on the 1st floor and a 2nd bedroom upstairs.
And that's for all 16 cottages?
Yes, that was the plan.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay. Do we have any other board members that have any questions?
Question.
Inez?
Yeah, I wanted to know so there are no guest parking. So like if each cottage has assigned 2 parking spots, one for themselves, or does the guests that come to visit have to park on the street on Bayview?
Yeah, I think the intention was to meet what the zoning requires in terms of the parking, which builds in a little bit of extra parking, I think. I don't think we would designate spaces other than those garage spaces for the reason that was mentioned, so that there would be some flexibility there. Certainly if there isn't parking allowed on Bayview, that certainly takes away one of the options for visitors to park that's technically allowed today. But we think there's enough parking on site to facilitate the amount of parking that we would expect for a project of this scale.
Thank you.
Inez, did you have any other questions?
No, I did not.
Have seen any other questions from the board members? Seeing none, I do see that we had two speakers that came on and raised their hands. I'm gonna let them speak so we can get everybody, and then we're gonna cut it off at that. Then we're gonna go to our staff report, and then we're gonna give Mr. Gargano an opportunity to answer any of the questions. So with that, Sean,
The next speaker is John Farina.
Hello?
John, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
How you doing? Like, I'm sure I'm gonna repeat half of what everyone else said. I've lived in East Islip over 50 years, and I personally don't live next door to this property. I personally would totally against having, you can dress it up and call it whatever you want, or whoever's titling it cottages, they're houses, they're mini houses. Who would want, I wouldn't want, I'm sure no one on that block would want 16 houses jammed into a little piece of property just so someone could make a couple extra bucks or a lot of bucks. It's gonna, traffic, I don't even need to get into that. If anyone, the builders, whoever, I'm sure you've been up and down that block. Has anyone been on that block? I don't know if it sounds like no one knows about the parking there.
No, I think that probably all the board members have been on the Bayview Avenue.
Okay, because I heard people asking questions like it was questionable if you're allowed to park or not. Trying to make a right turn's hard, left turn's almost impossible. Having a boat, if any of you have a boat or a trailer or you go down to the sports or anything, there's a lot of traffic. I think it's kind of pathetic that during a pandemic, any test was, any study was done. You couldn't go to a grocery store and say there's no one in there. And so, of course, the traffic was probably 99% less. The property value, I can't see how it's going to help property value. The people have been living there all their lives. They bought property to live in a certain type of area, and now you're going to make it, you know, like into basically apartments next door. No matter how pretty they look, and I'm sure they'll design them beautiful, but 16 houses, you're living on either side of that piece of property or across the street, forget about the traffic. That's, good luck with that one. Can I ask why they chose this location, since there is other properties to use?
We will ask the question.
Okay, as far as like with traffic and everything, not getting into that, but just say landscapers, plumbers, electricians, or whatever that come in there. Where are they going to be parking? You know what I'm saying? I don't see how this is going to work to be in that area. If anyone is anyone from that area? I mean, even if you've been on it and drove on it 100 times, is anyone live in this area that actually sees what happens? It's like buying a piece of property when it's not raining, and then you buy the house, and then you have a rainstorm, and you say, oh, it floods over here. No one told you. Has anyone actually been over there after the pandemic? Not that we're out of it right now, but now there's more traffic.
I'll ask.
Mr. Vice Chairman, that's 3 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Sean, I lost my board in front of me. But was that the last speaker?
We have one more speaker, Allison Hill Murray.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Allison.
Yes, hi, I'm a resident. I live on Quail Run, just off of Bayview. I know I am probably repeating a lot of what many have said, but just as the last gentleman pointed out, it sounded like, you know, there were people on the board asking the question whether or not there was even a light at the end of Bayview. Nobody seemed to know intimately what the area is truly like. Having Mulberry Street, the restaurant, Ralph's Ices, all the stores along Main Street, the new coffee shop across the street, the whatever that is, the American Legion Hall on the corner, and the laundry room. Traffic is absolutely horrific at that corner, and it is a danger. Even when I pull into the intersection, you know, after waiting many cars to get to, be able to make a turn. There's also walkways, people, like I said, there's a lot of stores and the laundromat, oftentimes people are, coming into the crosswalk and it's dangerous with bicycles. Nobody mentioned, when schools are in session and those school buses, it's a nightmare. Certainly the parking is a danger. I would certainly also add that I know intimately that on my block, myself and my husband's 56, I'm in my 50s. We have a 17-year-old, a 14-year-old. My daughter's driving now. When she has numerous friends come over who are driving now, there's way more than 2 cars, 3 cars, 4 cars. When my car is home, my husband's car is home, my daughter's, and then my son will be, soon be driving a car with all of his friends. So you definitely can't say 1 to 2 cars for a 55-year-old family. And many of my neighbors are the same age, also with kids the same age. So what happens when, a mother's living there or a father's living there with 2 teenagers and they all have cars and then their friends come to visit? I don't know if this has really been thought out. Again, I'm not sure why this property was chosen for a multi-housing development in such a small area of what, in my area were 1 acre properties for years. I'm not sure why that would be a focal point, for that location for this type of development. I don't know who's benefiting is the question I really have. And are those people that are benefiting, the developers that are, making the killing and the money they're making, are they living in this area? Are their property values and their homes going to be affected? Is their quality of life and possible danger, are their kids going to be possibly in danger with the traffic up and down Bayview? I really like the board to really seriously consider this and why they would allow. I think, at the most that should be considered is the 7 homes for development. And even that for that area of spaces is, I think, pushing the envelope, and certainly could, would certainly let those developers make the money that they can make. That's not, beyond greed. And also let the neighbors, be happy. It's a very, very fair and reasonable compromise.
Okay,
And
thank you very much for your comments. At this point, having no other questions from the board, we're going to move to Mr. Gargano and ask if there's any of the questions. And if you could address the main question seems to be with the traffic study, when it was done. I know you did mention it 2 different times, but maybe we can elaborate on the traffic study.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Am I being heard?
Yes.
Thank you. So if I may, I'd like to just, from the last community resident back to the beginning, I'd like to just touch base on a few of the comments that were made, starting with some of the points that Allison was making regarding this type of housing. I think it's important to understand that this is not the type of housing that somebody ages into. In other words, they're not starting with children and a family and aging into it so that they're 14 and 17-year-olds become 19 and 20-year-olds and start to drive. In fact, that's exactly what happens with the typical evolution of a single-family home. People generally move in, depending on the price point of the home. Could be a starter home, first-time buyer, a move-up home with middle-aged children, middle school, elementary school, that ultimately do become driving members of the community. So a typical single-family house can go from 2 cars to 4 cars or 5 cars. That's very typical in the evolution of a single-family home. In this particular housing product that we're proposing, although the minimum age is 55, our experience and having developed these type of housing for quite many years, it's generally people that are not 55, but in their mid to late 60s, early 70s. And the sole purpose of this move is to scale down, not to ramp up, but to scale down. They may not yet be retired, although again, in our experience and our long history in developing these types of properties, many of them are retired. A good percentage of them are actually single, no longer with a spouse. Not all of them, of course, but that's also a dynamic of the age bracket that this particular product starts to cater to. So there's clearly a decrease in intensity as this community starts to evolve and mature, whereas in a single family home development, it's the opposite. So we wouldn't expect that there would be a significant amount of cars beyond the occupants that would be purchasing the homes. Again, we find it very rare that an adult children over the age of 19 is living in one of these types of homes, because again, the age bracket that typically would buy into something like this is scaling down. Their children have typically moved out. That's not to say that it couldn't happen, but it generally is not our experience to see children living within these communities, adult children. The architectural floor plan, which includes single level living for the master bedroom and a secondary bedroom up on the second floor, is a fairly consistent design with this type of product. That second bedroom functions as a guest space or a study or a den or some other type of space. The general size of the homes, although it was commented by the first speaker that 1,500 square feet is by no means a cottage, I would absolutely reject that statement and say something in a neighborhood of 13 to 1,500 square feet is in no way a large home. It is a small home. And that would be, again, something that would not be conducive to people moving in with adult children. It could happen. I'm not saying it can't, it's impossible, but it typically does not in our experience over the many years. We rely on that as a fact. Regarding Kelly Carson, who lives across the street from the property, and some of the other neighbors, including Mary Moore, specifically talked about parking on Bayview Avenue. And we, although did not use Bayview Avenue to create our parking requirement, we have all of our parking on site. As I discussed just a moment ago, we would not be objectionable to the town of Islip, including no parking signs on Bayview for a certain distance down. In fact, I find that to be pretty common on a lot of town streets off of a main street where there's intense uses such as restaurants, the American Legion building. So that would be a positive, I think, for the community and something that we would not be opposed to as the applicant. As far as the left turn lane, no left turn on Bayview. I wouldn't want to comment on that. I would rely on further traffic analysis with our traffic consultant and the town of Islip. We certainly would not be opposed to anything like that, but I don't know the implications of that from a traffic movement perspective. Although from a practical matter, not making a left turn seems like a good idea, because that's exactly what is causing some of the congestion, is the inability to make a left safely. Going through some of the other comments, I do want to talk about the term traffic study, because I think there's some confusion concerning our approach to how we view traffic and how we did an analysis. What we did, we understand that there's traffic on Bayview. We understand that the intensity on traffic on Bayview increases significantly during the summer months due to the activities of the marina and the amenities at the south end of Bayview Avenue. So we're not blind to that fact. What we're simply stating, and have always been stated to the community, is that what we're making is a comparison between the as of right development and those traffic impacts, and compare that to what we're proposing, and feeling very comfortable that what we're proposing will not be an increase to the traffic impact. We're not saying that there's not traffic on Bayview. We understand that there is. To that end, the traffic analysis that we did was by comparison from one housing type to another. If we were proposing a fast food restaurant at this location with a drive-through, we would be making a traffic comparison in the exact same way. We'd be saying single-family homes can generate a certain amount of trip movements during peak hours, and a fast food restaurant with a drive-through will generate a certain amount of trip traffic. There certainly would be a differential there where there would be a significant impact with the proposed use. So we're doing the same thing, and we're just comparing the two different uses and saying based on fact that there would not be a significant increase in traffic. In fact, based on the population not necessarily using peak time movements, there might be a more favorable traffic impact for this particular proposal. Let me just check some of my notes. We talked about the left turn, talked about no parking. One of the neighbors mentioned 55 of age are still working, and I would agree with that. But again, what we find is that even though 55 is the minimum age to live in a community like this, the typical age is older, considerably older, and they're either retired or moving towards retirement or semi-retirement. And again, this is based on fact and long experience. One of the residents mentioned, and I'm glad that he did, he talked about what happens when landscapers show up, what happens when service people show up. And what I'm comfortable in responding back is saying that in a community like this, there'll only be one landscape contractor, and they'll be coming once a week to service the entire property, unlike single-family homes, which could potentially have 7 different landscape contractors, some of them coming at the same time, but certainly a lot less service frequency when you have a planned private community that is professionally managed, where all of the maintenance and all of those types of services are done collectively as a community versus individually with the individual owners. So again, another impact that could be substantially less than the as of right zoning. And that's what this application is about. And that's why we, as a longtime developer in the town of Islip, feel like we're presenting a responsible application, because we're not proposing something that is going to have significant and adverse impacts in a real way post-development if it were to be built. And we can point to many, many communities that are within the town of Islip and in close proximity to this location, where some of the very same comments came out of public hearings. But again, the properties met the criteria that was set in the zoning ordinances. Ultimately, some of those projects were approved, and post-development and into maturity of those communities, you're not hearing the post-development complaints as, well, we told you so, look what happened, we said it was going to be bad, and now the community is built and it's bad. You just don't hear those kinds of feedbacks after a community is developed, when it's developed responsibly and in accordance with the proposed zoning. And I think some of the biggest confusion that I have as a developer, and many of the homeowners that live in these types of areas have when a change of zone is presented, is why are you doing a change of zone? Why isn't is zoning staying the way it is? We have a zoning for a reason. Well, the fact of the matter is that in the town of Islip and in some other towns, multifamily zoning, while clearly a housing stock that is in need and a choice for many people, and we can't deny that it's a choice for many people, it doesn't exist in its as of right state. So we can't kind of look at a plan, a vacant land, and say, oh, there's a multifamily site over there, we'll go and build. What we have to do is we have to identify locations, and then we have to do an alignment between the location and the legislative district, such as this one with Residence C. So the town of Islip has the zoning, but doesn't have the land. It leaves it on the developer to match vacant land or reposition existing properties that have no longer work with the current use and try to propose a multifamily project. So that's why there's change of zones, and that's why we have to present in the way we're presenting. The fact of the matter is that at some point on Long Island, in many of the homes that people are living in that spoke tonight, there was probably a farmland at one point. And at some point, the agricultural zone was changed to residential for building single-family homes. And during that history, there was probably somebody saying, why are we changing the zoning from farmland to houses? Change of zone is a natural component of creating a housing mix. And I think everybody who's listening to me and on the board and in the audience probably knows somebody, whether it be a family member or a friend, who lives in some type of multifamily rental or ownership design. And it is a housing choice. And I don't think we can just say it's single family home or nothing. And when it comes to looking at locations that work for senior housing, we feel very, very strongly that this particular location, because of its proximity to Main Street, does meet a lot of the all of the criteria that's in the ordinance. If a resident is living in this community and they want to go and have lunch, or they want to go and get some basic needs, they don't necessarily have to get in their car. They could go to the restaurant and walk there. They could go to CVS. Obviously, they're going to use cars who live on Long Island, but this property in proximity to those amenities is why the ordinance is written the way it is. We work very hard with the community. We work very hard with the neighbors that surround our property, because those are the people that are most impacted by this development. And of the speakers that you heard from tonight, only 3 of them were from around the property. The rest of the speakers were from points elsewhere, whether it be remote from Bayview or further down Bayview. So we, again, will continue to work with our neighbors and everyone who wants to speak with us. And that's the best that we can do as a developer, is try to make the best project, hire the best architects, and deliver the best product. And that's what we're looking to do.
Thank you, Mr. Gargano. At this point, we're going to go to the staff for a report.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board.
Sean, I think you have to turn up your volume a little.
The microphone. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. As stated by the applicant, this application proposes rezoning approximately 2.5 acres of single-family zone land to senior multifamily for 16 semi-detached senior citizen cottages. The subject application consists of 2 residential lots, each improved with a single-family dwelling. The southern dwelling is estimated to be constructed around 1904 via town records. The proposal tonight is to construct 16 senior cottages and accessory garage spaces, and preserving the older dwelling, potentially utilizing it for the East Islip Historical Society. As proposed, the application will require some variances from the Zoning Board of Appeals, including setbacks for the proposed garages and front yard setbacks for 3 of the dwellings. The proposal complies with some of the legislative intent of the Residency District, which includes convenient access to a downtown center or existing retail services, providing open space and/or recreation areas, and providing adequate parking while maintaining a residential appearance. This is a unique housing concept that is not prominent in the town or on Long Island, and would diversify the housing stock for seniors should it be approved. Traffic is a significant concern, particularly access to Main Street from Bayview Avenue. This is also a departure from the prevailing development within the immediate area. So based on that, the staff would recommend the board reserve decision tonight to further review all the issues heard tonight with the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. And Sean, let me ask you, from the town's point, the traffic studies and the town's own analysts, do we have something from our traffic engineers?
We did not send this out to our traffic engineer because it wasn't of sufficient size, generally speaking, but should the board wish to, we can certainly refer to our traffic consultant for his comment, both on the site plan as well as the traffic conditions that were suggested tonight by the local community.
Right, and I would like to hear our traffic consultant's opinion on the comparison between the 7 single lots and the attached housing. Okay, with that being said, is there any other questions from the board? We have a recommendation from this planning staff. Do I have a motion? Mr. Matamore? You have to hit your mute button.
Sorry, I'm making a motion to close the hearing and reserve decision and have the discussions that you've mentioned, particularly about the traffic. And I like, by the way, Mr. Brown, your suggestion about our own traffic people. The problem making, just a comment while I'm finishing up that, is the left turn is a problem right now. And perhaps there's a solution with a traffic control device that would be acceptable to all concerned and improve what's there now as a problem. So I point that out. I think we're heading in the right direction to reserve decision. And that's what I so moved to do. Discuss it with our traffic people and with the applicant, of course, to see if we can come to a solution with regard to the traffic.
Thank
So
you,
that's
Mr.
the motion.
So I have a motion by Mr. Matamore to close the hearing and reserve decision. Do I have a second? Mr. Moriarty?
Yes, I would second Mr. Matamore's motion.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the application is reserved. For those of you that are still with us, what that means is that the application has been reserved and the process is still open and ongoing. Any information or any questions you think of tomorrow, the next day, or any information you would like, you can contact the planning staff or submit it to the planning staff via email, and it will be forwarded to the board just like you spoke tonight. So with that being said, I'm going to turn the hearing back to our chairman, Mr. Friedland.
Thank you. Oh, I'm echoing that. Okay, unechoing. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to.
Moriarty?
Go right ahead, Mr. Brown.
Second,
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to close the
is
hearing.
that Mr. Brown, who wins the second on that?
I'll win this. I'll take the second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Have a good night.
Okay.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Night, everyone. Thank you.